Hello everyone. The videos posted here at the RSP Film Room are not hosted on this server, and the original video content is not considered the property of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio Film Room. These videos are considered to be used under the Fair Use Doctrine of the United States Copyright Law, Title 17 U.S. Code Sections 107 through 118. Videos are used on this site for editorial and educational purposes only, and the RSP Film Room and its staff do not claim ownership of any original video content. RSP Film Room and its staff do not use the video clips in advertisements, marketing, or direct financial gain. All this video content in each clip is considered owned by the individual broadcast companies, and I'm using these clips, which are breakdowns of or cut-ups of players, basically to just educate ourselves and educate our viewing public on football. So with that mouthful finished, I am Matt Waldman. This is the RSP Film Room number 36, and I am joined by Jene Bramel, who is, among other things, Football Guys writer, injury expert, IDP expert, and one of my prized editors of the RSP publication, who has had the thankless task of putting that together, helping me put that together. So, Jene, welcome to the show, and good to have you on.
Yeah, thanks very much. I don't think it's a thankless task at all. I get to see the RSP before anybody else does. Little misspellings here and there that I get to correct in a Word document, they don't bother me at all. I get to see what you think about the quarterbacks and running backs, and those two chapters in particular were particularly good this year, although everything was good as always. So it's not a thankless task at all. I'm happy to do it. Thanks for allowing me to do it.
Well, man, it's a pleasure, so I appreciate it. It's very helpful, and I know that our readers absolutely appreciate that it's a much cleaner document than it would otherwise be. But today we're going to watch a little bit of defensive football. So now that I've kind of been mired deep into that, we're gonna get a chance to look at one Alvin Bud Dupree, who has certainly been making the rounds as being a high pick over the past several months. Someone who's improved tremendously over the years at Kentucky, and a fine athlete. And Jene and I have both made notes about him, on the internet, either through Twitter or in articles. I've certainly done some stuff with Football Outsiders on Bud Dupree. And today we're going to watch his South Carolina tape. But before we do, Jene, tell me a little bit about some of the thoughts that you had of Dupree and what you think, really Dupree has to offer in this game for us to talk with people about.
Well, the thing that jumps out about Dupree is his athleticism and particularly his explosiveness. So he's got some lateral agility. I think if you look at his short shuttle and three cone times, they're good. They're not amazingly good, but they're above average and they're very competitive with other folks in the class. But his vertical jump, his broad jump I don't think there's anybody that's been better than Dupree in the last 10 or 15 years. If you listen to Justice Mosqueda and some of the work he's doing on force players, Zach Whitman and the Spark scores, Dupree's explosiveness, and in particularly his stop-start explosiveness, is off the charts. And we're going to see some of that in this game today. In fact, we chose this particular game to show you how crazy his first step and first 2 to 3 steps are. But also what's interesting about Dupree is what he does with those first 2 steps. It's actually rare that he finishes an edge rush move on tape because of some of the technical issues he has. But I think having a discussion about the metrics and how his athleticism translates to football play and how he uses his feet and the rest of his body to translate that athleticism into making plays on the field is interesting. And I think we're going to nitpick him, as I've said this about Eric Kendricks too. I tend to nitpick these elite players. You have to have a baseline level of athleticism. Dupree's got it and lots more. But you have to be able to learn to do some of the skills on the football field to do that. And Justice would tell you, Zach would tell you, that there are some players that meet these athletic requirements that never fulfill their potential on the field because they don't figure out a way to translate their skills to the field because they're playing against very athletic players as well. But that you have to have this level of athleticism. So if we were talking about some of these technical deficiencies in guys like maybe Shane Ray or somebody who didn't meet the athletic requirements of the position, it'd be a totally different story. So we're going to show a lot of some things that I have concerns about Dupree's technical skills today, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't belong in the first round. That doesn't mean he doesn't belong in the top 10 picks, because if he can learn some of these techniques, his ability to get off the ball and his athleticism is going to make him unstoppable at the size and weight he is.
It's a lot like a receiver who runs a sub 4.3 40. You know, that's great, but you still need to be able to learn how to use that speed correctly within the context of being a wide receiver and not just a guy who runs really fast, you know, in shorts and a t-shirt. So you know, a lot of this applies with Dupree. And if you are new to the RSP Film Room, you know, this is just two guys watching some cut-ups that are provided by draftbreakdown.com. Draft Breakdown is just a fantastic site that I would recommend anyone visit if you're just even remotely interested in seeing highlights of a player. They package everything together for you by games, by players, by the position. You can find that. You know, you can find it all there, and they have some excellent content that is worth checking out as well from some, you know, an excellent group of writers, including Brian Perez and John Owning. You know, are two guys that leap to mind immediately. I could list far more. But we're going to share the screen. We're going to have this probably in slow motion. You're not going to see our you know, absolutely dashing mugs here anymore. So you know, basically
That's not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing at all. So we're gonna play this and just kind of talk about what we see and the position and go from there. So Gene, everything look good to you? See what we need to see?
Yeah, I can see it. Thanks.
Okay, good deal. So let's get it going. Put this in half speed and get to rolling. And we'll get rid of the sound. You know how fast a commentator talks when you can actually hear him clearly at half speed, and he sounds all right.
Again, similar to what I like to do on the linebacker side of things, I like to try to time the snap, and as soon as that ball is snapped, I'll pause through the first few things and just get a sense of how quickly the players get off the ball. And a lot of times, especially edge rushers, whoever, with the exception of interior linemen, except for Leonard Williams, a lot of times on the early downs, you'll see guys not break off the ball, especially in the age of read option. So that's one of the better plays that Dupree will make against the run. He sometimes has a little bit of trouble holding up against the point of attack, but if he can, you know, this is where he kind of uses his steps to get upfield quickly. He's against a tight end here.
Yeah, and I do like how he uses his hips here because you can see him driving off of the contact, and that's something that, you know, that's always a good sign. Is
his hands are inside the tight end's hands, exactly.
Yeah, he's converting his power and explosiveness right here. Drive, and there you go. Not a great hit, but he gets some contact.
When we do get to some of his edge rush moves, you're going to have to put it on full speed,
yeah,
just to see how crazy it actually is.
We will.
So all of these guys, I think all of the top 5 to 8, if you want to go that deep, edge rushers, they all have in common that they will pursue to the ball off the backside. They all have very good motors. You very rarely see them taking any plays off. It's one of the few times you'll see Dupree drop out into space a little bit. He probably did that about 15 or 20 times in the 5 or 6 games I watched him.
Do you feel like that he has an opportunity to be an outside linebacker
in
that position?
Absolutely, yeah. I think he's, and there you get a sense of just how quick he can get off the ball. But yeah, his lateral, even though I said, you know, he's only above average, you just see how quickly he's past the tackle there. You know, he's 2 steps ahead of every one of his defensive linemen. He's at the outside shoulder of that tackle before the tackle really even gets up out of his stance. Doesn't even have a chance to get into a pass set. And this is consistent. This happens on every play.
Yeah, that's some crazy fast stuff right there.
And this isn't a, you know, this doesn't end up being a passing play here. It's another read option situation. What you see Dupree here do is why I think there is potential for him. You're not going to see a lot of this later in the game where he gets past that offensive tackle and flattens and gets his toes pointed in the right direction so quickly. On a lot of other plays, he's going to be pushed another 5 yards up the field. But you can see that he has some understanding of how to reduce that shoulder and get going toward the pocket. We're not going to see too much more of that, so this is a good indication of what he can do if he cleans his technique up a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, and that get off is very impressive. And there he's playing his role. I mean, certainly he's just making sure he's taking care of the outside edge and filter, kind of funneling it inside.
He's got a good mix of both. He'll do things like that where he'll kind of knife in and really attack a gap. He'll have other plays where he wants to, control the edge and keep his outside shoulder free. He's not particularly dominant at either one of those techniques, but he can do both.
I'm not overly impressed with his tackling over that, though. That was a nice one on that play.
Now, I think if you want to see a violent finisher in this edge rushing group, it's going to be Dante Fowler.
Yeah, and I think that was what you were talking about earlier today before we did this show, was that this is a guy with bad, as you said, had bad intentions.
Yeah, and especially between Fowler's tape, between sophomore and junior year, you could tell this year that he was playing under control, but he was playing with bad intentions for sure. He was finishing violently, run plays, blitzes, everything. So even something as simple as that, you can see how athletic he is and how quickly he eluded and then continued on past that running back there. You can just see the feet are there, the athleticism is there, and he just needs a little bit of. I mean, that's pretty good right there.
Yeah, it really is. I mean,
can't even really tell that he slowed down in his path to the quarterback, but that's a running back jump cut of about 3 yards without slowing down any of his forward momentum.
Yeah, definitely nimble feet. Good, going down the line like that?
Yeah, and that's another instance of, well, 2 things. One, his ability to get off the ball quickly. He beats the tackle very easily to the gap he's supposed to attack. But you can also see him kind of lift up there. He shows his chest to the tackle that he's already beaten, and he gets redirected a little bit. And again, that's nitpicking, but you kind of see him roll back there on his feet as he gets redirected. Now, that doesn't hurt him. I don't know that he certainly wouldn't have made that play anyway, and he's almost still getting out to the same spot where that running back is, but it's just an indication that there's some technical issues that he's going to need to clean up. If he does that against one of the better, more athletic right tackles in the NFL, he might get thrown to the ground there.
Yeah, and let's recall Mike Davis here, this running back, has some pretty good burst. He has NFL caliber burst. Not a superbly fast individual for his position, but he has excellent burst, and that's the kind of thing that you're going to see a lot in the NFL. He's going to be facing backs with this kind of get off.
That's a wide 9 there too, and he gets across the face of the tackle. Some of that's probably film study. He knows which way that play is most likely to go based on the formation. But this is 6'4", 270, by the way, people. This is not 6'2", 235. This is 6'4", 270.
Yeah, that's insane. That really is insane to look at it from that perspective, because it's not. I mean, are you making a subtle reference to Mr. Randy Gregory?
Well, I like Gregory a lot more than some folks do too. I think Gregory plays with more power. I think Beasley plays with more power than his frame would suggest. I think both of those guys are more powerful. I would be a little bit more worried about, maybe a Shane Ray or somebody like that. He's going to need to be a little bit more technical, but you just can't knock guys for being 235 and 240. We've had Robert Mathises, we've had lots of players come through the league at that 235 to 255 range when they started out, and been very successful.
That's a great point. So that's a really great point about that. And sometimes you just have to look at the position and say, what is the variation of size, dimensional range for that position? And I would think that defensive end, outside linebacker, has a little bit of a wider range than other positions at the interior of the line. So
there's more to overcome. I don't think that you can say that every 240-pound edge rusher tweener is going to be successful. They've got to have more functional strength than the 90% of guys with similar size. They've got to have better athleticism. They need to have a little bit better technique to survive. But we'd never see Levante David or Telvin Smith or lots and different types of players in the front seven in the league if you simply knocked players off your draft board based on height, weight, whatever. It's one fragment of what your evaluation needs to be.
Absolutely. I would say that for every area athletically that a player has maybe falls a little bit below the baseline, you need to have compensatory factors that will help that player out. That kind of erase that or modify it a little bit. If you're a little slower, your technique has, like you said, has to be a little bit stronger in certain areas. So if you're not as big, then you need to be a little quicker. There are all sorts of things like that. So this play is interesting. What were you going to say?
I said all that seems like common sense, but sometimes it tends not to be.
No.
It's a common sense thing to say. If you're smaller, you got to be stronger. But it just doesn't. That's not what you hear in the little snippets of all the things you'll hear from anonymous scouts and even non-anonymous scouts as you go. That's why the combine exists to separate the very best athletes in some way. And one of the ways they get separated is if you're 235, I may not be as interested in you as if you were 245.
Yeah. And I mean, and also oftentimes what the scouts are saying is it has to do with their team and what their team is looking for and not what fits overall. And so that context is always very important. What about this play here? You see him do a nice job of kind of using his outside hand to get into the inside shoulder of the blocker, and seems to me that he does a nice job of filtering through here to make a play.
Yep. That's why I said, there's going to be some, and you're noticing the tackling issues as well. He's not really a wrap tackler in a lot of ways. He's bringing his shoulder, but he's not wrapping much.
Yeah.
There's another instance where he's so quick off the ball, the offensive tackle that knows he's in a pass set has to resort to trying to cutting him as he comes around the edge here.
Yeah, that's just, and it's clean. He gets around that clean as if it's nothing at all. And you got to think that's kind of scary because it almost looks like, he's firing a gun and he fired a blank, the first time and then fired the shot the second time.
He's so quick out of his stance, and the acceleration is there too. And I think that speaks to, again, that's where you see the vertical, the broad jump that he has there.
How many games do you like to look at when you're looking at a guy like Dupree, who, as an edge rusher and what he has to offer?
I would like to look at as many as I can. I think that if you watch 2 or 3 games, you get a flavor of what he is. But anymore, there's enough variation in college offenses that if you watch 3 games against a team that all they want to do is read option, you may never see a guy attempt an edge rush. As we were choosing which game to, I've got 6 games that I watched on Dupree here, and had we chosen one, we probably would not have seen a lot of his first step or a lot of his edge rush, because you'd have seen a lot of that. You'd have seen him working on read option plays. Kentucky may have been, way behind in some games where he's not rushing a whole lot too. So I try to watch as many as I can, and I think, especially with edge rushers, sometimes they get a little bit more mature, or their tape study gets a little bit better as the season goes along, so you can see them thinking through the game from start to finish a little bit differently. So I think in the past, we may only had access to a couple of cut-ups, and we'd miss a lot. So if you know that you're watching a player that's going to be a first-round pick, kind of an elite guy, it's nice to get as many reps in as you can.
Makes sense. What do you think about his strength here, and anything that he would need to do? He's coming inside, I believe, on this play. Let's see if we see that. No, he's coming outside. This was an outside.
So this is an instance where, again, he has beaten the tackle on his first step, and if you stop it just as he engages right there, right about now is when he should start to get his toes pointed toward the quarterback. He should get that inside shoulder down to give the tackle very little to go with. You see him kind of open up so the tackle, even though he's beaten, can get his right arm into Dupree's chest and start to redirect him. And as you finish, so right there, he's getting pushed, he's off balance, he's getting pushed straight upfield, he's not impacting the pocket at all, and that's a tackle that was beaten badly, who is able to recover, and Dupree doesn't impact this play at all.
Yeah.
Whereas, right there at that 3 or 4 yard mark, if he'd started driving back in and using the power that he has to dip and reduce that shoulder and flatten out and get toward the quarterback, he would have impacted the play. But you can see he's beaten that player. And if he gets that shoulder down and he gets his toes pointed in the right direction, he can flatten out and come straight across the pocket.
But his hips are way too straight at this point, too. He's just not.
He's flown open.
Yeah.
So that that inside foot should be planted, and he should be working off that foot, driving back up into the tackle and flattening out. And that's something that in these 6 games that I've watched him, he does not do. And I asked Alan Dumanjic about this, and I asked him to take a little bit closer look at Dupree, and he said, what you want to look at is look at his ankles, and you can't see it when he's on the far side of the field, but if you can see him turn his ankles, then that suggests that he's going to be able to flatten out a little bit more. And that was something that Alan taught me I hadn't realized, and that has to deal with their flexibility, and that's something where your 3-cone times and your short settle, the 3-cone in particular, because you really got to be able to get those ankles turned and those feet turned to be able to use your functional strength to redirect your path. And Alan thought he had that, and as we get maybe into the third quarter and him going on this side of the field, we may be able to see a little bit more clearly. So Alan felt that this would be something he'd be able to correct.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember what Ryan told me about this. I asked Ryan, I said, can you learn to edge rush? And I think what he told me, I got to find his line because it was just way too good.
No, and it's a great point about the ankles. I hadn't heard that myself, is whether you can do that. You can see a little bit of the ankle turning here. Let's see if he gets that when he gets around a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think he can do it. And, I wrote something for your blog a number of years ago when we were talking about Quentin Copels, showing how low Jason Pierre-Paul gets and how quickly he converts his speed to edge rush. And within 3 steps of driving upfield, you could see Pierre-Paul turn his body, flatten out, and go. And if you can flatten your edge rush within 5 yards, then you're going to impact the pocket every time. A lot of these clips with Dupree here, you'll see him, he still hasn't turned toward the pocket. He maybe wanted to try to in that 5-yard window, but still wasn't after 10 yards. He was getting pushed 10 yards up the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Ryan said, I said, can you learn an edge rush? And he said, can you learn to moonwalk effectively? I said, that's the wrong question to ask me because I don't even know that I can do a box step, but I see your point. So there's another situation pretty similar there. He's trying, but he's, see how far he gets pushed upfield?
Yeah.
And you don't notice it so much because he's so quick, but he's finishing 10 yards past the line of scrimmage here. That's where he should be flattening and come across. Right now, he's 10 yards, more than 10 yards past the line of scrimmage before he's crashing down.
So basically, let's see, where we're at here, but about
right there, I would like to see him plant that inside leg, get his toes toward the quarterback, drive up under the offensive tackle, and move toward the pocket.
Now, somebody's going to look at this and say, "What about the back here?
Mm-hmm.
How do you address that? What are you worrying about here?"
I would rather him make an effort to push that back into the quarterback than to continue to rush upfield here.
That's a great point.
But it's more the technique. You just see him, it's almost like he's being put on skates there by a offensive tackle that's beaten.
We'll look at it one more time here. Yeah. And it's his own doing.
Correct.
Yeah.
He's made the play already. When his shoulder is even with that offensive tackle, that's where the power that he has, we know he has, should be coming into play. He can get up underneath that. If he doesn't give such a large target for that offensive tackle to recover, he can get up underneath that shoulder and drive him back. You can already see that, he's out of balance. He's got both his feet past the offensive tackle.
Yeah, it's almost kind of
like he should be making here.
It's like that wide receiver parallel. If he's even, he's leaving, and also stacking that defender. Getting in front of him so that you have the positional advantage, and he just doesn't do that yet. At least not in these games right now that we're seeing. I mean, in contrasting with the Louisville game, because we talked about the Louisville game as an option that we were going to watch and how he's gotten better. But even in that game, I don't recall him doing a lot of this.
No, but what he showed in the Louisville game is that he knows how to use his hands. So there's, in the Louisville game in my notes, I've got some instances where he showed good power, where he could do speed to power, where he had a little bit of a push-pull move, where he grabbed the tackle and kind of pulled him in and then ripped to the side, where there's some maturity in his edge rush, in his moves. But if you've got this type of first step, this is a first step that wins against anybody. Wins anybody in the league. There's nobody that can defend this first step, but he's got to be able to close the deal.
Yeah.
There's more to edge rushing than just getting off the ball.
And especially when you look at this 70 pounds, 2 pound
he was
body.
269 at the combine.
Yeah, 269. And runs like this.
Just see, it's a shot. The first step is good, but the second and third steps, his acceleration is even better. So he's a blur.
Yeah, that's ridiculous that he's right here at this stage. How big was Bruce Smith? About 278?
Yeah, he was in that 275 to 290 range, I think, playing 5 technique.
Yeah.
And even if he doesn't clean all this up, I think he's going to be effective.
Why is that? Because of that first step?
I think it's at certain points he's going to get some coaching. He may never become an elite technician, but I think where they'll put him. If they put him from a wide 9 alignment and he knows how to convert speed to power, and he can make an outside step and an inside move. I think there's, just through watching him, I think there are 3 very effective pass rush techniques that he can use. And I'm fully behind what Ryan says, and I can't point to necessarily anybody like Dupree in the past who I've said that first step is great. He's a poor technician and has improved. I just don't recall anybody off the top of my head. But I think this is something that, again, as Alan said, with his ankles, and you can see, even right there, so you can see that's kind of a situation where, obviously it's a bit of a screen look here, and the guard is off. But you can see him use his hands. You can see him redirect. And just like that play we showed where he was jumping on the quarterback after the fumble, his feet do not slow down.
Yeah, and the driving through there off of that contact is so fast. Even just watching it from a slower angle here, you'll see.
So that's it. That wasn't a great one, but you can see that move was set up with an outside step.
Yeah.
It wasn't a hard jab step to the outside, but that's something that translates to outside the tackle boxes as well.
Jason Babin's an example of a guy who's kind of more of a wide 9 guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Or
and
how
I think,
he's used and used best, even though he's not nearly the athlete that Dupree is.
Yeah, I think if your first step in your acceleration is your primary skill, then getting down in that 4-point wide 9 stance is a huge help. But he does, I mean, his first step from a 2-point stance is more than good enough.
Yeah.
And none of these guys, it is rare for a college edge rusher to enter the league NFL ready. They all need time to, either put some more weight on their frame, learn what they can and can no longer get away with against better offensive tackles.
This is an interesting play to me because I think, is this a guy that teams are going to say, we're going to run at him? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I think they will run at him until he figures out how to defend it a little bit better. I mean, there's a tight end on him, and I know it's just one play. But
it kind of starts this, the action is very much almost like it's a zone run action the other way. So, his job is to kind of scrape and hold that backside there. So he's shuffling his feet, keeping his feet free, but he lets that tight end get that reach block on him.
Yeah.
And he's got to keep that outside arm free if he's going to set that edge appropriately. So that's his issue there. I think he recognized he was expecting that play to go the other way, but it's kind of, it's a read option with a counter element to it.
Yep. And they got in one of their small fries here as an excellent, change of direction guy.
Yeah. And his feet are in position there, but he just gets that one step, and when you get reach like that, it's really hard when your momentum's taking you that way for you to be effective.
Yeah. Again, this is nitpicking, but I really do hate his tackling.
Yeah, leading with his shoulder rather than wrapping.
It's just like you have an opportunity to blow this guy up, really.
Yeah. That costs him 3 to 4 yards.
Yeah. You're not gonna bring Mike Davis down that way. And I think a lot of people in training camp are gonna figure that out with Mike Davis. So
there you go again. There you go again.
Yeah.
That is crazy. And this is one of his better edge rushes, but again, he ends up where the quarterback is at the top of his drop. But just, he's up, he's gotten pushed off, he's lost some of his momentum, he's got around 3 or 4 steps to get there.
His hands should be on this ball if he did this the way that by textbook. And we'll look at it in full speed. One more time.
Again, this is the first step is good, but you can't even see the second and third steps. In slow motion, you can't see them.
Yeah. Yeah, those second and third steps have that kind of like Roadrunner acceleration thing going on in the animation. You just see a big circle with his feet kind of moving around.
Even when he gets to the tackle, he's low. But just because of the target he presents the tackle, he gets himself so high and redirected. I would love to see that front shoulder down, so the only thing the tackle has a chance to get is the back of his shoulder. And then if they push the back of the shoulder, he's got enough hip roll and enough functional strength in his lower body to stay up, and he's still driving to the quarterback at speed. When you give that shoulder open like that in your chest, right from there, instead of flattening and coming down, I mean, he gets this. Again, you're going to see it doesn't look like that much because he's so fast. That's 6 yards he gave there.
Who's a player that bends extraordinarily well?
Well, Von Miller is ridiculous.
Right. And who's someone
Jason Pierre-Paul, for his size, is really good. I really like the way Cameron Wake does it. I don't know if it's still on your blog, Matt. If you look for Jason Pierre-Paul, the still images I put in that show you that the angle at which he comes through and how quickly. I mean, that was before the days of GIFs and everything else that we would put on here, but just taking some images. I don't know if it's that one or if it's the. So there you can kind of see some of the. That's what I like to see. Give him as little of that shoulder as possible, And you see where his toes are pointed, that lean up a little bit higher, the image up a little bit higher.
This one?
Maybe it was the one up. Yeah, that one. So you can see him driving up underneath, and even if he gets pushed here, if you're strong enough with your hips to stay up and not just get driven into the ground,
yeah,
you flatten it there, and you can kind of get a sense already of where I don't remember exactly where the line of scrimmage is, but I think on this set of plays, he's impacting the quarterback 5 or 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage rather than 8 to 10. So you can see even though he's getting pushed there, he's strong enough to still be under and go. There's a good look at it there.
Yeah.
So that's the one that's the one that always comes to mind for me, that you'd see where on the shoulder you'd like him to dip. How you'd like to, they're just right there. You see, his toes are pointed right where he wants to go, and you're not going to push him to the ground there.
Yeah.
So he's using his core strength to stay up and drive through without losing any momentum.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, because I think it's important for people to see kind of what the template would be in this case. And certainly now, I think that helps people kind of get an understanding of where Dupree needs to head with his game.
And he's going to be interesting to watch, because that's something very specifically in the first couple of years I'm going to want to know, because I can't recall a player like him. A lot of these college guys don't have perfect dip and flatten and accelerate technique, but this is going to be a very interesting test case, because if he can learn to not do that, I'm not sure how you stop him.
Yeah.
I mean, again, look where he is and look where the line of scrimmage is there.
Here it comes.
So wide open. He's past the tackle. The tackle's reaching out, lunging for him, and shoves him 7 yards upfield with one last final push. Right there, he could still dip.
Yeah.
And flatten. So he's got 2 opportunities to do this and doesn't get either one of them done. 12 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and the quarterback checks us down, and it's a first down. That was a first down that should have been a sack 2 different ways.
Again, nitpicking, disruption is production, all of that sort of stuff. But I just think this is a situation where if he cleans that up effectively,
this should be a sack right here. And
most of these plays should be a sack to me. Now, you got guys in pistol sets and shotgun sets that are 5, 6, 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage, taking a 1-step drop and getting the ball out quickly. But
it's almost like he's too preoccupied with what he's doing here to this back with his arm, rather than going, okay, just bend. Let me just bend right here.
He is, and you can make the argument that his eyes are on the quarterback and he's trying to get to where the quarterback is. And he knows he's already past the offensive tackle. But you would think that the number of times this happens over the course of the year, that his coaches would say, and I'm sure he's working on this, but this is a situation where elite athleticism, but at some point does it translate to football player?
Yeah. It strikes me talking to guys like Ryan that it does take a special feel for the position and there's a lot of multitasking going on, as you mentioned. And multitasking isn't an easy thing to do. So I think that there's a little bit of that when you're talking about looking at the quarterback, what you're doing with your hands on the lineman, and how you bend your feet. There's a lot to process in that short period of time.
So there's something that's pretty starkly contrasted to what we saw a little bit earlier, which is he gets under the pads, delivers the first blow, has his hands inside, able to shed a lot easier, doesn't finish the tackle. But in comparison to that zone read look we saw before where he got reach blocked, he's the one that's initiating the contact here on a similar type of play.
Very true.
And more effective.
Yeah.
So I think he can, you asked before, can he drop into coverage? Yeah, he's athletic enough to drop into coverage. You're not going to ask him to trail a tight end down the field or anything like that. And this is, everybody wants to compare some of these players to Von Miller. And Von Miller in all phases of the game is just ridiculously good. He's very similar to Dupree as an edge rusher, but Von Miller's ability to play with leverage against the run is about as good as you'll see too.
Yeah.
And there's that type of potential here. Again, 6'4", 270. With a 42-inch vertical leap and, I don't know, 2-mile broad jump, I think he had. He might not have landed yet.
Yeah, right? And we haven't heard from him since the Combine. He might be orbiting the Earth, that's true.
I think you get a sense of his ankles there. That's a pretty good look that says he can get up on his toes. He can turn his ankles. Kind of in there, you can see him. There's some turn there. There's some turn there.
Yeah.
I think it can be done.
And I think you're right about the toes thing, very much so, because Ryan and I were watching Sean Oakman, and I think it was me that was making the commentary about how Oakman looks like he's running around in scuba flippers, and that maybe that might be part of his problem, is he's not really working off his toes and exploding off the balls of his feet as much as it looks like that his toes and his balls of his feet are kind of flopping around after he strikes with his heel on the back of his foot.
You would, from a biomechanical perspective, you're going to see most of the very best athletes are a little bit pigeon-toed rather than the other way around. They may be bow-legged and pigeon-toed like Marshawn Lynch, but but you'll notice that. I mean, Michael Jordan. One of the things I noticed when I was a kid about Michael Jordan is why are his toes kind of flapping to the inside like that? It's just it's a quicker, more efficient way to get your lower body going in one direction.
Yeah. I always joke about my wife because she was kind of a little pigeon-toed as an athlete, and she was short. But, she told me that when she ran the 100, she still owns her 100 record, as I talk about here many a time. She ran an 11.2 100. And as a female athlete, I believe Marion Jones ran a slightly better time in high school as well. But my wife, who was an inveterate pack-a-day smoker and smoked before her meet and was a slow starter, she said she'd have all these gazelles like standing next to her looking at her like, what are you going to do? And she was kind of a short, stockier build, kind of muscular athlete, and would just kind of turn on the jetpack. And a lot of that was kind of the same, she ran kind of that way, that pigeon toe sort of thing going on. So, yeah.
You're really not sure what what's going through his mind there, and whether or not he could have converted that to a little bit more of a powerful move. Kind of slowed his feet down a little bit when he engaged, when he realized he didn't really have an outside lane. It looked like he wanted to do speed to power there, where you drive upfield 3 yards and then really try to come back inside.
Yeah.
It just wasn't violent enough with his hands to make it work. And maybe, again, in this particular play, his job was to make absolutely sure that he didn't lose contain.
That's true. In a 38-38 game, maybe there's a little bit of caution there.
So there's another. You could see him maybe try, but you'd like to see him either go ahead and convert that speed to power at that first engagement, or if he feels like he's got that shoulder pass, again, dip, and then, like he's not really sure what he wants to do there. Then he tries to dip, but he quits on it.
And then just as a contrast, we have Zadarius Smith over here on the right-hand side, who I've talked about a good bit, as someone who, if you took these two players and combined the best of their traits, we would probably have the overall first-round pick and a potential Hall of Famer, because you look at Smith, and he's not nearly as fast, but watch him use his hands. He has a move, uses his hands. If he could have dipped and actually had the athleticism and speed, it would be all over.
But you see him reduce his shoulder and flatten on a line there.
Yes, you do.
It's late, and it's not really part of his edge rush.
But it's there.
But you can see him dip the shoulder, get his toes going in the right direction, right there, and go.
Yeah.
Just makes himself smaller.
Of course, as we're and critiquing all this, Dupree scores the
nitpicking, right?
Yeah, the game-winning interception here off of a tip pass.
But, again, motor. He's not giving up on the play.
Yep.
Athletic enough to get it out of the air and finish. I still like Dupree. I don't know that I would have him. Certainly wouldn't have him over Beasley. He's right there with Gregory for me. I think there's more to Gregory than meets the eye. But this athleticism, again, there's some certain things that you can't teach. You can't teach a 42-inch vertical leap from a guy that's 270 pounds.
Despite what the back of those magazines say.
Yeah. Give me some of those plyometric shoes, and I'll have my 40. And then all I have to do is gain 100 pounds, and we'll be ready to go.
All right, sounds good. Stretch out those Achilles. There we go.
Piece of cake. There you go again. I mean, look where he. It's frustrating at times, I mean, you see what could be right there, and that's crazy where he is right now. And then get that foot down and go.
Yeah. But that's the thing. That's what makes athletes so special when it comes to the top players. That it's more than just one component. And it's easy for us, I think, as evaluators, when you see great athleticism, you just keep thinking, if only they got the hard part. It's not the easiest part is actually learning the techniques, but it may not always necessarily be the case. The hard part, for an athlete, it's the grass is always greener type of thing. And maybe for the athlete, it's like, well, the hard part for me is the technique.
Yeah, I think those wide receiver parallels are really good. I know that's one of the reasons you liked Odell Beckham as much as you did last year, is because you could see the athleticism there, but some of the technical things he was able to do.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. It's a combination of both skills, and also with talent like you mentioned here. And I think this would be a good time to invoke maybe Kelvin Benjamin here, because there's breadth of talent and there's depth of talent. And I think that breadth of talent is how many different things they can do. What are all the various techniques that they can exhibit? How good are they on run, pass? How good are they at the edge or looping in inside? All the different things that maybe an edge player would do. Can they drop into coverage? But if you have an edge player who can do 2 to 3 things really well, that's depth of talent. And sometimes that's all you need. Kelvin Benjamin, as a wide receiver, he can't run routes all that well. You're not going to see him making a ton of great plays as a route runner. He's making mistakes right now. He probably will get better at a lot of it. He has some issues being able to get off the line of scrimmage with his technique in a way that you would look at his size and go, if only, because look at how ridiculously big he is. But then you use him in a situation where you say his depth of talent is put him in the red zone, give him some perimeter plays where he can win one-on-one and have the sideline as his friend, and he can be a 1,000-yard receiver for you. Now if you compare him to a guy like, a perfect example is Robert Woods, the Bills wide receiver, who is a nice technician, can get open, run a variety of routes, but Woods at his best doesn't have the size and the size speed dimension combination to bully players. So he has to be that much better as a technician to produce at the same level that Kelvin Benjamin does with a much narrow range of talent, but a much deeper focus area where that can be exploited. So it's very similar with Dupree. But yeah, that's it for Bud. Certainly, a lot of good things to see here in terms of potential.
Why don't you put you want to put the Louisville tape on for just a second?
Yeah, we can do that.
Let's show 2 plays.
Okay.
And if my notes are right, I have a sense of, you can see just how good he'll be able to be.
And we'll do that right here. Let's see. And if you haven't been to Draft Breakdown, there's a little bit of what Draft Breakdown looks like as a site. And you can see we can sort it by prospect and look at their edge players. And we got our Dupree right here, and then it shows all the games. And we're going to look at Louisville. And I'm just going to, just for ease of use, I'm going to click on the YouTube portion right here real quick.
Would you go ahead and run it to the 10-minute mark on that tape.
Okay.
I've highlighted, at least in my notes, it's highlighted as one of the better. It's not an edge rush, but it shows what he may be able to do as he matures.
I remember this play.
Again, you can see just how quick that is and how he's aware enough to set himself up with a hard step outside. And there may be a replay on this one too where we can get a better look at it. Can't remember if there was or not.
We'll look one more time. We'll look at this. We'll look for the replay here if we can.
And again, just the way he closes, it's a little bit upright through that, but you can see his hand. So he had a good hand slap there. And everything else we talked about in the previous play was equally impressive.
No, the replay doesn't really show enough here. Let's see if it's another angle. Don't think it is.
Kind of that hard step outside and the rip.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a counter he's going to have often just based off his first step and edge rush.
Those first two steps do it right there.
He gets him to overset to the outside because he fears the edge rush.
Yeah.
But knowing that he's going to plant that outside foot and go.
Trying to see if we get another view of it, but it doesn't look like we do. Yeah, that was it.
Oh, okay. How about try 732?
Okay.
And then I'll stop with my Bud Dupree fascination here.
No, that's good. Here we have him at the top of the screen.
It's a little bit better with what he wants to do with his shoulder and move in. It's not exactly what I thought it would be, but his hand placement's a little bit better than it's been. He's trying to control his outside rush a little bit better. Almost has a hesitation to that edge there.
Yeah.
You could see him try to dip his shoulder, so and that's, I may have noted that one more for the ankle and the foot placement than anything else, but I think there's some things there.
Yeah, I don't think he trusts it yet, and you can see where he doesn't trust it, because watch this. I think the trust comes into play for a defensive end or an edge rusher is you're going to be bending while someone's grabbing a hold of you and you only have one hand on them. And I think there must be something intuitive about having to trust the idea that you're not going to get shoved to the ground because you've got the angle advantage, and that you don't need to do anything with this other hand other than to keep it free and to keep driving forward. But he's slapping on and turns his upper body a little bit into that arm, trying to get rid of it rather than continuing to just move around and move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. That maybe he is still learning to trust that he's strong enough to do this. And that even though, again, he showed his chest is wide open there to the tackle that he's beaten, but he's got enough functional strength to not be pushed down to the turf as he goes around and flattens a little bit more tightly than he's done in the past. Now, in the other clips we've seen, he'd get pushed all the way out here to the Cardinal.
Yeah. So this is
later in the year, so there's some improvement. I think.
Yeah, I think he's going to get better. I think he's going to get better for sure, but I think this is just part of that process. It's like when when you were playing basketball as a kid and your best friend was, 5 inches taller than everybody else because he had the early growth spurt, but he didn't really know how to use his body well to post up on somebody and didn't know how to trust it. It's kind of, to me, like Dupree. You look at this guy and I don't think he realizes how to trust that 269, 272 pound body in a way to say, I don't need to do anything with this hand other than to keep bending my waist and get around. So there's a lot of effort put into slapping that arm that just doesn't need to be there. So it is a process, and like you said, he's getting better. He just needs to continue to trust what he has physically. Anything else?
No,
Okay.
I'm wishing we hadn't ended on a play where he gives up a touchdown. No, I think that's, I always say it, but I think part of the fun of doing these with you is that we get to look at the technique a little bit more closely, and we're talking about a top 5 draft pick here, and um, recognizing that there's still a little bit more maturity and improvement in him, and how good could he be if he's able to do those things.
Absolutely. So we'll end this note on Dupree making this nice play here, just for the aesthetic value for my defensive friend here. And for Jene Bramel, I'm Matt Waldman. For Bud Dupree, this was certainly enjoyable, and stay tuned for next episodes. Take care.